Neil, the crypto curator, bringing a show to you about CBDCs today. I know that's on top of everybody's mind, but before we get into that discussion about CBDCs, let me thank our sponsor, RoundlyX. Listen, folks, go over to roundlyx.com, use the code Bitcoin is Freedom, and you're going to get $4 worth of Bitcoin. That's right, $4 worth of Bitcoin just by signing up. This is the best way to stack sats because you're just going to do what you always do without any changes, and stats are going to be stacking in the back. So go visit roundlyx.com, use that code, and let's get on with our show.
Here we go.
Let's get started.
All right, folks. Hey, listen, back again on a Sunday afternoon, getting ready to talk about CBDCs. And in order to talk about this topic, I am going to bring on both our producer and Style Pigeon to discuss this topic with, because I think that both of these guys have some great insights and they're very passionate about CBDCs. So this should be a fun discussion. How you guys doing?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having us on.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I enjoyed 3D Change's show on Digibyte. I'm sure John enjoyed that show as well. He's a huge Digibyte fan.
Yeah, he's a huge fan of so many different things. I have trouble keeping track of all the stuff that he's doing, especially now that he's working with NeoSwap. He's having to dive into that AI world really, really hard. So I've got a constant stream of information from him. My brain feels like it's about to explode these days.
Yeah,
awesome.
John is very busy.
Yes.
Yes, he is. Well, hey, let's dive into this conversation about CBDCs. And, you know, I was talking with Nick trying to come up with the title of it, and we've discussed CBDCs before, and that was on one of our previous shows last year, but we're back to sort of talk about it again because there's been so much that's been happening with it. And so on the next slide, we're talking about Central Bank Digital Currencies. If you don't know what CBDCs are, they stand for Central Bank Digital Currencies. And we're asking the question or making the statement that you should opt out of them. And that's going to be a question that we're going to discuss is how do you opt out of a CBDC? So what I want to do is I want to first cover some stats with these guys. I'm not sure if they're aware of this, but it's very interesting, believe it or not, to note that these stats exist. So the current stats right now for CBDCs, and if you remember, Natalie Smolinski, I think that's how you pronounce her name, and Dan Held, they did a paper about CBDCs, but this information is from CoinDesk. And internationally, there's 105 countries representing over 95% of global GDP. They're actually exploring launching a CBDC. And this is according to the Atlantic Council's Central Bank Digital Currency Tracker, which there's a hyperlink to that. Did you guys know that there's 105 countries representing that much?
No.
I didn't realize it was progressing quite that fast, actually.
Like they say, slow at first, and all of a sudden, and that's what's happening. Yeah. Now, if we look at the next 2 points, the central banks of Israel, Norway, and Sweden have teamed up to explore how CBDCs can be used for international retail and remittance payments. And then you've got China, Thailand, Hong Kong, and the UAE. They're attempting something similar in their Project Enbridge. Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, South Africa, they came together with Project Dunbar. So there's a lot of projects out there with CBDCs. And as we said before, it moves slow. Then one day we're going to wake up and everybody's going to be like, what? You guys don't have a CBDC? It's just natural.
Yeah. And it's scary how fast it moves because the thing that always trips me up is like, I'm not exactly sure what they're actually trying to accomplish that Bitcoin doesn't already accomplish, but I won't interrupt yet. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. And that's what we're going to start digging into because there's been a lot of current news just this year on what's been going on with some of these pilot projects. So the first one to look at is India. Now, if everybody's familiar with India, there's a lot of people in India. And India they also have other digital type money projects going on called the Unified Payments Infrastructure, I believe it is. So the question becomes, why do you even need a CBDC anyway? And so, but we're going to look at that. So the first article was covered by two publications, Cointelegraph and CoinDesk. This was on the 2nd of February. And it says India retail chain Reliance Retail rolls out support for CBDC payments in stores. Now, if you guys aren't familiar, this is the biggest chain in India, and they've decided to adopt a CBDC with their store called Fresh Pike or Peak. What do you guys think about that?
Go ahead, Nick.
I'm surprised that it moves that fast, right? I mean, I knew that India was sort of like a laboratory for CBDCs. China is of course the biggest and the fastest in this regard, but I know that India is also sort of allied with the West, and it's sort of a laboratory, I think, for Western countries to try out CBDCs. There's some interesting connections between the US and India in this regard also.
Yeah, well, to be honest, the West is actually getting left behind with this because, as we've seen, 105 countries, a lot of these projects are maturing awfully fast. And as we can see with this Reliant Retail, they've partnered with a CC Bank, Kota Mandarin Bank, and fintech company Innovati Technologies to roll out that support for CBDC. So you see a lot of players that are starting to collaborate to bring these CBDCs to market. And of course, when they launch them, it's going to be nothing more than a QR code that you can go to the store, scan the QR code, boom, use the CBDC. It makes it fast, efficient. So if CBDCs are so great, why are we pushing against CBDCs? It seems like it's going to be awesome.
Well, my approach to this argument is I don't know how what you just said deviates from the systems that we currently have. Like electronic banking has been around for a while, and it does everything that you're talking about. Yeah, there are fees, but like that's because it's centralized, right? Mm-hmm. So if you centralize a digital banking currency, if a central bank runs a digital currency, that's what they've been doing. They just haven't been using blockchain technology to do it. The only thing that's going to do is make their security systems more compromised because they don't know anything about blockchain, right? It's not the people who are super pro blockchain who are building these. It's people who are learning about Bitcoin after the fact, or about blockchain technology after the fact, and trying to launch into development of a digital currency on the blockchain. But the problem is that if you haven't built anything on the blockchain before, why would you roll that out for an entire country or an entire group of countries? That makes no sense. We've already got blockchain technology that works great for all of this stuff. The only difference between all of the stuff that we've already built and CBDCs is the fact that it's centralized, powerful control. So, I mean, the argument about CBDCs is easy, right? We think we should use a digital currency. Okay, great. Do you think that the federal governments across the, sovereign states across the world should be able to take that control and put it in the power of, or in the hands of only a few people? Or do you think that it should be decentralized to the public? That's the argument. If you can't make that argument one way or the other, then I mean, you're lost at sea.
Yeah,
right.
I think also, right, because the current system as it is has digital currency, of course. So many people, normies or people who are not familiar with cryptocurrency, they are like, whatever, right? Same difference. But with the current system, of course, you have this intermediary ledger system of banks that are sort of in between us and the central bank. So the central banks they can't view what we buy, when we buy. They don't have the full record, and normal banks, commercial banks, they don't have to actually give that information to central banks, nor would we want to have them to have that, right? So you would eliminate that whole intermediary system between us and the central bank itself, and that would, in a certain sense make it more efficient, from their perspective.
Yeah, well, on this from this article from Cointelegraph, CoinDesk, it says one of the motivations behind the CBDC is that it's going to reduce the operational cost of managing cash. And while we do have some money that's quote unquote digital, when they're able to get rid of all the paper money and the metal money, right, then it's going to make it easier to manage that. And that's one of the reasons that they're saying that this is motivating them to go toward a CBDC.
True.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that would motivate them.
Yeah.
Are you saying we can have more
Exactly.
control over this? Okay, yeah. No, I'm on board. You got me sold.
Well, what
Yeah.
you're going to see is you're going to see some of these projects, though, they take a little bit of a different stance in that, but we'll get to it. Go ahead, Nick. You were going to say something?
No. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, on the next slide, I wanted to cover some voices, and I call it voices because this is what some of the folks are saying now. This is from a senior official who's working on the pilot for this Reliance CBDC, or Reliance is the company that's using it for CBDC. But they say from Reliance to Indian Oil to Cafe Coffee Day to roadside fruit sellers and tea vendors, several partners are now set up to use the digital rupee, CBDC. And from Reliance Retail's managing director, he said this historic initiative of pioneering the digital currency acceptance at our stores is in line with the company's strategic vision of offering the power of choice to Indian consumers. And so we're seeing that the Indian people are actually using this. So again, I think that, do you guys think they're using this sort of ignorantly, not understanding what's coming?
I think some people in power know full well what they're implementing. And I think some people, like retail business owners, are sort of forced to comply in order. Actually, George Gammon did a really excellent show on CBDCs. I'll also link it down below in the video. But I think, retail business owners, they don't fully understand what they're implementing often. And if they do, they are probably forced to do so.
It's just like
So
the
you think
RFID chip. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. RFID chip?
I was going to say, when they rolled out RFID chips on debit cards here in the US, I was like, well, why are we doing this? Well, it's for security. Okay, but like, what does that mean? Like, nobody was stealing my money to begin with. You're telling me that I've been insecure for all of this time and nobody said anything about it? And now that I've got this little piece of metal in my card, I'm going to be safe? How? Well, what are you talking about? This is just another bit of technology for people to hack. And the same thing goes for, these blockchains that they're implementing for the digital rupee. Like, it's a problem because ultimately what you're doing is not changing anything. And that's what Bitcoin has been trying to do for, over a decade now. Yeah, over a decade now. Sorry, I had to do the math real quick in my head. I'm not good with simple math. But we've been trying to tell people, like, yes, we can do this. It's very efficient. It's a wonderful bit of technology called blockchain. And they're like, well, we don't trust you. What is it? But then, a large body like a government says, oh, blockchain's great. We should implement this. But we want to implement it ourselves. And you're like, okay, cool. That's smart. Let's do that over again. I mean, the whole system that we have in place with fiat currencies was a great idea to begin with. It's just that corruption happens over time, and you have to constantly be figuring that out and learning how to mitigate that on behalf of the citizenry of the world. I mean, we need somebody to look out for us little guys and gals.
Yeah. And I think also with, the whole affair since 2020 and the sickness that spread over the world, you also saw these retail businesses that didn't want to comply were sort of forced to participate in, QR codes and all that kind of business, which was also for our safety, right? But, you could ask yourself, what did that actually do, right? Did that actually help spread the sickness, or, And I think the same thing applies for digital currencies, right? I think they'll walk the same road. Yeah.
And it's interesting again because you look at the Indian population, it's a lot of people. And so at first, India didn't seem like they were really interested in CBDC, and it seemed like overnight they switched, and all of a sudden now they're like fast tracking the implementation of this. But if we go to our next slide, even though, and I sort of did this as far as time, as far as the actual dates go, so I'm going to jump around just a little bit. But Kazakhstan has also went into a digital currency pilot stage, and this is in conjunction, I believe Binance is working with them. And so the National Bank, they have a joint report that came out on the 3rd. Cointelegraph highlighted it, but it says the National Bank of Kazakhstan, NBK, has launched the pilot of its central bank digital currency project called the Digital Tinge. So have you guys are aware of that or paid any attention to it?
No, to be honest, I'm not very familiar with Kazakhstan's politics.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of their CBDC system, and also I'm kind of surprised of Binance involvement in creating one, which put a different light on Binance. So that was that's interesting. Also,
Yeah,
you know,
well,
oh, you're going.
No, I was going to say, there's a couple of voices that were from those articles. And on the next slide, it talks about the NBK's deputy governor, and I'm not going to try and pronounce these names because I'll butcher them like nobody's business. But this is what he said: in Kazakhstan, we also started a practical R&D project to explore how CBDC, digital tinge, can bridge the world of crypto with traditional fiat payment infrastructures. And then this is from Binance report. It says a digital tinge CBDC initiative is already in pilot phase using the controlled environment, real consumers, and in a controlled environment with real consumers and merchants. Currently, the BNB chain and NBK are testing CBDC integration with the BNB public decentralized blockchain to bridge the gap even further between traditional banking and the crypto ecosystem. So here you have Binance, which is a platform, an exchange that a lot of people use, a lot of people love. Most of these CBDCs are either being built on Ethereum or some other blockchain. This is on Binance's chain. It's decentralized. So isn't this a good implementation of a CBDC?
Well, okay, let me ask you this question. When you hear about a new coin or a token, what are some of the first things that you normally research when you start looking into it? Paul, specifically.
To be honest, I don't deal with a lot of new projects. Mostly
Okay.
all Bitcoin and Ethereum, but definitely the platform that it's built on, that team, their reputation, you know, how long it's been in existence. This is going to be a rug pull, the whole 9 yards that goes through looking at any token. Yeah.
Perfect. And that's exactly what you should do. And it's also exactly what we should do with these, right? What's the code look like for the digital tinge? How does it operate? I know that BNB is going to be the chain that they use, but is that going to be just on the BNB chain? It's not going to be a separate token or anything? How does that work? Like, there's a lot of details here, and the devil's in the details with these CBDCs, right? Because if they just made Bitcoin and then they were like, we're going to use this blockchain, it's like, okay, well, I'm still in support of that. Like, I don't know why we didn't just stick with Bitcoin to begin with. But if they're going to do something else with it, which is what they're going to do, then we have a whole slew of questions to ask prior to being like, yes, I'm okay with my government doing this to me. And I understand that not everybody has this American mindset of like, I own the government. That's not the case all over the world. And it's starting to not be the case here, which is one of the reasons that these things scare me as much as they do, is because I'm actually very pro democracy and freedom and all of that stuff, probably seated somewhere in the middle of all that political spectrum stuff. But I don't think that the government should be able to program my money. That just seems like an infinitely bad idea to me. We've seen it time after time. Read a freaking history book. Governments start out thinking this is great, we're going to take care of you, and then it cycles around to corruption, and eventually the people are too stupid or too ignorant to do anything about it, and the government ends up tyrannizing them. It's not going to be a shock to anybody who's read a history book when the money becomes the force of tyranny. I mean, and I'm not against government. We need government. We need government. We have to have somebody to hold the big stick, essentially, and protect us from things like foreign invaders or just overall violence that gets way out of control. But if all that they do is implement violence themselves, then how is that any better than the tribal systems that we've had in the past? Do we really want to repeat the travesties of the 20th century? I mean, we're talking millions, or actually over 100 million at least, corpses that came from tyrannical governments.
Yeah, no,
That's, I mean,
you make good points,
I
and I
laugh
think
because
I
the
think
numbers are
there's
crazy, like over
yeah,
100 million.
yeah,
and most of those came from governments who strive or strove for utopian visions, right? So they wanted
Yes.
their objective or their mission statement was, to make the world a better place for everybody, right?
Yeah. So I
right.
don't trust them when they say that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think these systems are so complex that it on the surface it might seem like, oh, well, why don't they just use Bitcoin? But I think there's so much there that it's just not as easy as just saying, oh, go use Bitcoin. I used to be able to the same thing. Hey, everybody just needs to go to Bitcoin. I
Hmm.
mean, it would be nice, don't get me wrong, but I think there's a lot of different moving parts that it's not easy. One, again, I think the government, it's no surprise, they got to have control. They want control. They can't control Bitcoin. I mean, all they have to do is what the government's going to go buy up, hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of Bitcoin and then issue them to people. That's not going to work. So I think we're looking at parallel system. We're looking at Bitcoin, which is going to be that freedom system, and then you're going to have all these systems controlled by
Lost
government.
people.
Oh, so
Oh,
I meant to say earlier, if I can interject,
Okay.
that this is actually one of the reasons I'm pretty satisfied with the U.S. being slow to CBDCs. Um,
hmm
I always reference a book by Orson Scott Card called Ender's Game, where he was into geopolitics and stuff, and he tried to basically predict what he thought would be the smartest, best thing for the U.S. to do. And in his books, what they did was they pulled back from trying to police the entire globe, and they focused on making money and being unbelievably productive and unbelievably well educated, and tried to grow the culture of the United States. And in the books, they end up running the like International Space Force or whatever. So it's hugely advantageous for them in the books. But I think that that's actually one of the things that might be possible for the U.S. going forward is let India and Kazakhstan and all of the 105 countries do this while we sit back and watch and see how that goes. And then if worst comes to worst for us economically, we just switch to Bitcoin and save everything. Now, I'm not saying Bitcoin necessarily, Paul, like you said. I think other technologies are really important and significant as well and should be looked into and used. I've been hearing a lot of cool stuff about AVAX lately that I didn't know. So those technologies are great. But as far as having a specific currency that's recognized globally as an exchange of value, I'm having trouble seeing how we could do any better than Bitcoin is the issue.
right.
And why would you
Yeah.
not do the best thing?
Yeah.
And I think what you said is right, and we also talked about that a little bit last time we talked about CBDCs. I think the US will be the last big country that will implement CBDCs because they have the least reason to introduce it. And I think most of the other countries who are introducing it are often introducing it either in reaction to US policy or probably being prodded to do it under the auspices of the IMF and other and the World Bank and the Bank of International Settlements, and which some people claim are sort of extensions of the US. So I think it would be very beneficial for the US not to implement it and perhaps even implement Bitcoin instead, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's the problem is that in the U.S. there are so many hurdles to jump over to get something like that implemented that it's not going to be easy. You need a lot of people to agree to make things happen, and that's going to be hard.
But to put a fine point on it, it's sort of if that's the case, it sounds a little bit like divide and conquer, right? First, you eliminate your team partners, right, in the rest of the world, and then you're left alone, standing when they do implement it. But if you
Right.
don't have European allies anymore to back you up, or people all over the world, then you're on your own, right?
That's true. That's true. No, and again, like I said before, with this Kazakhstan one, they are doing it on the BNB chain, which is a decentralized chain. So that becomes, and again, I haven't done deep, hard research into how each one of these change and each one of these CBDCs are being launched. But if they are doing it on a decentralized chain, the question becomes, can they control it to the point where they can do all these things that are probably not beneficial to the citizens, or they limit it because they're using something like a BNB chain to do it? And I don't know. I still have to look into it.
I think BNB is not that decentralized as it claims to be. So, and I also fully understand, BNB's or Binance sort of involvement. I mean, there's lots of money involved with developing a CBDC system for countries, right?
Yeah, why would you say no to that contract?
Yeah,
exactly.
And you got the monetary element, but also, of course, the influence power element that also comes along with it.
Yep. Well, as we look at India again, and this came out later in the month of February, this was on the 7th and 8th, both CoinDesk and Cointelegraph put some information out there, and it's sort of unpacked. Now, I'm going to tell everybody, if you do nothing more, you should check out this CoinDesk article. It goes into a lot of depth because it's unpacking India's CBDC pilot as they prepare for their digital rupee. And I'll sort of read through this a little bit. So with India, there's really two different items at play. They launched two CBDC pilots last year. The first one was a wholesale CBDC effort called the CBDCW, which began on November 1st with the participation of 9 banks. And again, this shows you the level of collaboration. 9 banks were playing with this pilot. It was in this pilot specifically, the CBDCW is restricted to financial institutions, and it's meant to improve the efficiencies of interbank payments. And this is the part where a lot of people have to understand with CBDCs, there are a lot of different moving parts. It's not only as cut and dry as like it's just issuing money. So right now, the CBDCW is between banks. Now, the other one is a retail CBDC, and it's the CBDCR, and that launched on December 1st. In 4 different cities: Mumbai, New Delhi, Bengaluru, I guess that's pronounced it, and Haba, I can't pronounce that one. Initially,
Bhubaneswar.
Thank you, Bhubaneswar. Initially, these 4 banks include the State Bank of India, CC Bank, and Yes Bank, and IDFC First Bank. They all participated, and this CBDCR is for private sector and Indian citizens. So again, when you're looking at these pilots and these projects, and by the way, all of this is testing phase. None of this has been implemented perfectly, and it is now the de facto system. They're still doing a lot of testing, trying these systems out, and we're going to see what happens to it. But to finish with the last 2 points, and I'll let you guys come in. The CBDC also doesn't require any time for settlement between the banks and the buyers and the sellers, unlike that unified payment interface for India, their UPI. And then India's recently launched CBDC pilot has amassed over 50,000 users and 5,000 merchants. So again, this is starting to mature very fast. While we might think and might look at it like, oh, shame on CBDCs, apparently the stuff is working so far in this pilot phase. It's going to be interesting to see how it develops and matures. I don't know if you guys have any quick thoughts.
I think what's also very interesting about well, first of all, in China, they're also still in pilot phase, right? Because some people think that CBDCs are running the country, but that's not true, right? There are still the big cities that are sort of in pilot phase. But the interesting thing about India, of course, apart from what I said earlier, is that it also has a lot of unbanked, and it's also a country where they usually test out things, also pharmaceuticals, right? So it's a sort of a perfect laboratory to test these things and to sort of see how they work, but also especially because you got so many unbanked people there. Can you actually fix that or get them into the system? So I think it's an ideal playground.
And one of the things they were making a point about the difference between UPI and the CBDC is, believe it or not, you don't have to have a bank account to use the CBDC. So for unbanked people, this system is going to work because you don't have to have a bank account. And that's going to be a deciding factor, I think, on how this goes. And on the next slide, there are some voices that came out from this article that I do want to highlight as well. The first is publicly, the RBI has said that CBDCs will provide an additional option to the currently available forms of money that is easier, faster, and cheaper to use than the existing payment rails, along with the transactional benefits of other forms of digital money. And privately, as an emerging economy, one of the world's largest populations in 2023, and the fifth largest in GDP, India's geopolitical motivations is countering the dollarization of global economy. So this is another reason why they might be moving to a CBDC, is that they don't have to deal with the dollar.
Yeah, like I said earlier, right? Partly it's a reaction on the current system, especially by the BRICS. You also saw the involvement between Russia and Iran creating a similar coin, and there's a lot of talk for a very long time for the BRICS to sort of launch their own CBDC or a cryptocurrency backed by commodities or a basket of currencies, and then maybe situated, for example, gold, and then situated the vault in Switzerland and the rule of law of England, like Jim Rickards often says. Yeah, so sort of to run a counter system to the dollar that can act as a reserve, a future reserve, or an additional reserve currency next to the dollar. So that would be the de-dollarization idea. But I think the other thing is, what we said earlier is, it is also a way for perhaps Western countries or developed countries to sort of experiment with these systems in order to expand control over their populations.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, on the next slide, a senior official who's working on the CBDC, he said, in the context of the internationalization of the Indian rupee, an Indian CBDC will make it easier for the nation to get international acceptance because it is digital. They said for emerging markets, it is a good weapon to have so that in the future, when we're looking for internationalization, this can be one good help. And that's a senior person working on the CBDC. So we're seeing that CBDCs is going to open up a lot more that they can do that they cannot do with their current currency.
Yeah, but I don't really buy into this sort of progressive narrative that, because one country does it, then you're sort of forced to do it too. Otherwise, you're like a caveman or something. That's totally nonsense, right? We shouldn't sort of head over heels implement something just because somebody else is doing it in order to win the weapon race or whatever, right? I think we should take it very, very slow. If personally, we shouldn't do it at all. But if you do it, do it very, very slow and involve as many people as possible, and especially people who have knowledge about these things. But you got this article which you actually highlighted in your Bitcoin and Politics show, that the EU chat control law will ban open source operating systems, including all Linux distros, which I found very, very worrying, right? Because you don't want a CBDC that's not open source, right? Because then you sort of have to trust their word that they're not gonna change it, modify it along the way, right? And I think when you sort of look at blockchain and crypto and the whole development within the space, it's basically it's automatization, right? That's what it does. It automatizes. Yeah, I think that's the word. Everything, right? So it takes away not only jobs, but it also makes things easier to control by taking out people out of the picture completely. And that is, I think, a thing of crypto that some people sometimes forget. So like conveyor belt system and all these sort of systems, because it's a ledger system that is working automatically, which you can sort of create robustness within the system by decentralizing it in case you get hit by an EMP or an earthquake or whatever. If you have like a couple of nodes, then when one node goes down, the operating system is still operating automatically without issue, right? So that's sort of the how governments look at sort of the benefits from decentralization and blockchain. It sort of automates the system, and it makes it more robust. But of course, they don't want complete decentralization because they want to keep control of the system. But they do want to decentralize it somewhat in order to resist attacks from counterparties, etc.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think Stahl was mentioning earlier, is that one of the things that I think is important for everybody to understand about these things. I don't work for a bank, so I don't have a banking background, but I can only assume that there's so many levels of complexity when dealing with the money system that some of these things that they're pointing out is going to in fact help. Like they said, if in fact India does have a CBDC, will it make it easier for them to do more international, movement of money? I think so, because the way the system is set up right now, this is one of the things Ripple talked about, is that Nostros and Vostros account. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but it's very fascinating. Is that if a bank in the US wants to send money to someone in China, there has to be a bank that they send the money to. Well, that bank has to have that currency on hand. And so what happens is that you have to move large sums of money into these banks all around the world. But with Ripple, and this is what Ripple's argument was that you can use XRP and you can move money, zip it around the world super easy without having to have these Nostros and Vostros accounts that have so much money just sitting there doing nothing. You now can put that money to work because now it's going to zip money back and forth. But I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, if you've heard about it, but Nostros and Vostros account, look that up. That's very important.
Yeah. But still, right? I think many people still have and I think George Gammon again explained that very well in his last video. There's not that much money sort of laying around in vaults and sort of moving around the world, right? It's basically matching up ledgers, and that's it. And then we got a couple of loose coins in our pockets that few people actually ever use. And they try to get rid of on birthday parties, but most people are just sort of matching ledgers, and that's about it, right? So, like Pigeon said at the start, right? What are they actually sort of improving upon? Right? They're sort of just cutting out the middleman.
Do you guys actually still deal with paper money and coin style? Do you still carry money around or no?
So I carry hard cash on me on a regular basis. Okay. That cash is for I run out of gas on the highway, and I'm in the middle of Orangeburg, South Carolina or something. There's no they don't have an internet connection at the gas station. You know what I'm saying? Because right. I used to travel a lot because I used to build hiking trails. So you'd be on the road up in the middle of the mountains with nothing around you, right? Nothing but lichen on the trees and stuff. That was your only friend. And so having a $50 bill or whatever on you is like, okay, this can get me back to civilization where I can use my debit card. So I do that. I try to do that rather. But other than that, I don't really ever pay stuff in cash unless I'm going through like a really strict, if money gets really tight, I like to do cash budgeting. But I could easily use an Excel spreadsheet or something to do that. I'm not very good with actually taking responsibility with my money. That's one of the reasons I'm here, right? Is to learn about that and get better with finances. But I appreciate Nick actually referencing what I was saying, because that's it. The whole argument, we make point after point after point after point about how are these CBDCs great. Well, being in sales, what's the first thing you do when you want to sell something? You come up with a list of benefits. That's the list of benefits are the same for CBDCs that they are for regular cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and whatnot. So if the CBDCs don't accomplish everything that Bitcoin does, or if the CBDCs accomplish different things than Bitcoin does, we need to know about that. Right now, it seems like the situation is CBDCs can do all of these things, but Bitcoin does this many things. Like there's some overlap, but this is actually possible with Bitcoin. And so what we're trying to accomplish is your CBDCs are faster than what we used back in the 60s. Congratulations. Excellent work. You made a slight advancement in technology. However, the thing that we're trying to accomplish is not making things more efficient. The thing we're trying to accomplish is the decentralization of the financial system over a period of time. I know it can't happen tomorrow, Paul. I get that. But and I don't even know fully how the financial system works, right? I definitely have a gap in my knowledge there. But the decentralization force is going to be the next step in the evolution of human society, right? We tried the totalitarian thing, that didn't work.
Right.
Now we moved to like the idea of freedom, I guess, through democracy or whatever, and Western civilization, right? The rise of Western civilization gave rise to all these awesome things, the Industrial Revolution, et cetera, et cetera. What's the next internet that's going to happen?
Yeah. So, well, this
right?
is
Like,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Nick. I'm kind of rambling. My apologies.
What's the next thing? That is, of course, the fourth industrial revolution that's just around the corner. And I also link a really nice video about that, actually 2 videos, one by the web itself and one sort of a counter argument to that. And I think, that's also one of the benefits of CBDCs and why we should opt out, because that's the title of the show. But sort of a CBDC system also links up with NFTs, right? It links up with the whole fourth industrial revolution that some people are trying to roll out all over the world. And that is, robotification, AI, 3D printing. All these things need automatic ledger systems, NFTs, right? The whole sort of panoply of things that this utopian vision from especially the World Economic Forum, that sort of implies a cryptocurrency or a CBDC system that makes it possible. Otherwise, these robot systems and all these other systems, they simply cannot communicate and keep track of things, right? And you should also not forget the fourth industrial revolution is in sort of counter to previous industrial revolutions, because we had basically 3. We had the steam engine, and then we had the gas and oil revolution, and then we had the digitalization revolution. And now we have the fourth industrial revolution, but this time we are the product, right? It will be a merger between machine and man or woman, whatever. The transhumanist vision of the world economic, because they have a transhumanist world vision there. And to keep track of all these things, to integrate all these things, you need basically a totalitarian system on a world scale that keeps track of every little thing. And that's why they roll out a CBDC. I mean, that's why they absolutely need a CBDC system that is somewhat decentralized.
But if you look at the next slide and what the RBI deputy governor says, this goes sort of counter to what you guys' fears are. He says what exactly will happen will depend on how things evolve. But anonymity is a basic feature of currency, and we'll have to do that. And to that extent, it is again different from UPI, which is not anonymous because it carries a digital footprint. He says, we want the process to happen, but we want the process to happen gradually and slowly. We are in no hurry to make something happen quickly. Doesn't that put you guys at ease?
Do you want to go first, Nick?
Well, Paul, of course they would say that, right? I mean, I'm not saying that these are evil people, and even the people at the web probably have the best intentions at heart, right? Maybe they really think we are next stage, and we need to take the step to become a giant ant colony, right? I don't know. Some people might think that's a great idea, but if you want to implement something that other people would probably rebel against if you spell it out, then you would say stuff like, we'll do it gradually, we'll put safeguards in place, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we promise. We ran the studies. So the thing that gets me is actually, this is a hilarious instance of doublespeak, because not only is it overtly doublespeak, right? That is like, okay, yeah, sure. It's clearly a "we promise you" statement that's not backed up by anything necessarily.
Don't trust,
not only
verify.
that, what?
Don't trust, verify, right?
Exactly. We're trying to create trustless systems here. The funny thing about it, though, is that he misses the point by saying, of course money has to be anonymous. Like, no, we don't want it to be anonymous, you bunch of crooks. Like that's been the problem, is that you guys are doing crazy stuff with money in the background that nobody can hold you accountable for. That's the problem. And you're presenting that as if it's like the salvation of the planet. Like, you're completely just over your head somehow. I don't understand.
One of the nice things also from CBDCs, right? So one of the, we sort of forgot it, but I remember, a couple of years ago, like 10 years ago, they would say like all those Swiss bank accounts, the crooks are using offshore accounts like in Panama, blah blah blah. We have to make it transparent so nobody can hide anywhere. We can find all the criminal money and stuff. But if you implement a CBDC system, you basically centralize everything, also criminality, right? So the criminality just rises to the top, where it becomes infinitely a worse problem than if you got decentralized criminality, right? So
I mean,
go on.
I was going to say, I mean, that's really how we built New York City, Nick. I mean, we just gave it to the mob and we were like, good luck, guys. And they built the ever living snot out of that city.
Originally, it was Big Amsterdam, right?
Yeah, the original Big Ants.
So
again, one of the worst deals in human history.
Exactly. No, it is crazy. But this is why, if you remember JP Morgan, they were using ZK snarks. And what banks also say is that, listen, our transactions do have to be private to a certain level because we need to move money back and forth. And it's just like as individuals, I don't want the government being able to know exactly how much money I got and where I'm moving this money to. So you do need some level of privacy. But what you're saying, though, Style, I agree with you. The system that you're operating on needs to be open and transparent so that we can understand what the heck is going on behind the scenes, because that is where the danger comes, is if they're able to do secret stuff behind with the money system that we're not privy to, that's a problem. And that's where you can't have anonymity. You got to have transparency.
Yeah. And
right. So your identity should be anonymous, but your bank account should be transparent. That's the disconnect that they're making when they're making these statements, right? I want my identity to be anonymous as much as possible. Obviously, I'm like becoming a personality on the internet, so maybe I'm not making the right moves for anonymity, but
that's right.
But I don't want someone to know my social security number and be able to impersonate me. That's another thing that decentralized blockchain technology solves that CBDCs don't overlap on. Right. And that's the big concern, is that plus programmability. But I know we said we have a time limit. I want to bring y'all's attention to that.
Yeah,
sure. Absolutely.
One more thing is that's another reason why they don't like Bitcoin, right? Because it is fully transparent. And then, if you're like a financial institution, like BlackRock or whatever, you would see every move they make. Right, and it would be completely transparent what they do. That's the last thing that they want. And before we cut off, I really sort of want to highlight something that Henry Kissinger once said: if you control the food, you control a nation, and if you control the energy, you control a region, and if you control the money, you control the world. Right. So I think that he made a really good point when he sort of started the petrodollar. But I think what the next move is, why don't you take control of the food, the energy, and then abolish money altogether, right? that will be way more powerful than this sort of intermediary state.
No, I agree, but I think that when they try to do it, if they do it too big and too fast, there will be an uprising, right? People are not going to tolerate this. So they are going to do what we're seeing doing, slowly chip away at the system until they can get that control. It's like the frog in a boiling pot of water, right? Just slowly keep turning the heat up, eventually cook them to death. And I think that's what they eventually will do, possibly with this. And I think you guys do have valid points. We as citizens must be aware of what's going on with the CBDC projects. And if you're not aware, this is where it's going to get us. But from my perspective, this is why you opt out. Listen, will you have to use the CBDC system? Of course you will. But you should be opting out by using Bitcoin, which is the most decentralized, censorship-resistant technology on the planet, and it is a store of value. Anyone who wants to debate Bitcoin being a store of value, look at it. Started 14 years ago at $0 and it's $23,000 today. That's called a store of value. I don't care what you say. So that's the way I think we need to look at this. And this is the reason that people, are we saying don't ever use a CBDC? You're not going to have any choice but to use them. You have to. But you can also opt out and put money somewhere else that is your store of value. That's the way you can decentralize yourself out of the centralized system and make life better for yourself and your family, hopefully,
Yeah,
right?
and I think to also say something about you, right? What you always say is, you should also engage the government, right? Engage your constituents, engage your representatives, right? Reach out to people, talk to them, influence them in a positive way, and also, like you say, right? If you opt out by buying into Bitcoin and starting using it and understanding it, it also puts a limit on your government, right? The amount of damage that they can do becomes limited as more and more people move over on a sound system, sound money system, and that can also be gold or silver, right? I'm not only Bitcoin fanatic, right? I mean, there are other forms of sound money out there, but I do think Bitcoin is, probably the best. Yeah, no, it is the best. So yeah, but it sort of limits the damage that governments can do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just to quickly run through those last slides, and I won't run through all of them, I'm just going to mention them all in one big swoop. Here's the thing that people need to understand when it comes to China. China project continues to evolve at a very fast pace. If you're familiar with China, China just had their Lunar New Year. And as a result of having their Lunar New Year's, the Year of the Rabbit, right, they're pushing a lot of this digital CBDC, digital yuan out to people via, red cards and via, free money. And they're incentivizing their citizens to use it more and more and more. I would say by the year 2025, you're going to see a lot of China's money become their CBDC. And eventually they're going to turn the switch and say, we are now on a CBDC standard. All the other old, China ones are no good. Please take them to the bank, exchange them for the CBDC. And now that's the way we sort of do business. And so folks need to definitely keep their eyes on what China does. The rest of the world's looking at China and trying to understand, hey, can they take the good parts of China and use it? Probably so. And so if they're going to do that, they'll implement them. Will they also take the bad parts of China? I think some countries will. In the US, they're going to get a lot of pushback because United States people are not going to play that game. So I think you'll have a lot of pushback and fight if they try to implement authoritarian type style infrastructure with our digital dollar.
Yeah, and I think there will be a battle, or the battle's already begun between decentralization and centralization, and it will be massive, right? And I hope decentralization wins, but the powers of centralization, they will go all the way, right? They will go for complete totalitarian centralization style because there's almost no middle way there.
Yeah.
Maybe we should add an amendment to our Constitution, Paul. That's we have the right to bear arms. We should have the right to bear capital.
Well, believe it or not, here in the great state of Texas, I happen to be happy I'm here. Ted Cruz had a bill last Congress about no CBDC, right? And also the representative from Oklahoma. I think we're going to continue to see that type of activity in Congress, and I think we're going to continue to see people here in this country push back. But definitely visit Capitol Crypto. His legislative tracker has all the bills. It's now restarted, so there's not as many bills on there anymore because it's a new Congress, 118th Congress. But what I would encourage you guys to do, and Nick, I know you're over in the Netherlands, still, I would be encouraged if you guys would make it a point before the end of next week that you've reached out to your representative in some shape, form, or fashion. Tweeted at them, reached out to their office, made a phone call, write them a letter. Just find out who your representative are. Here in the United States, we have 3 different levels: local level, state level, federal level. Find your representatives and just send them a message about, it can be almost anything when it comes to half of the stuff. CBDCs, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's the miners, whether it's, you name it. Just reach out and contact them. And there, like I said, Nick, I'm not sure how you guys do it, but I would encourage you to find one of your representatives and reach out. I'd be interested to see if they respond.
Well, actually, I've been very disillusioned with politics altogether, but that has to do with the EU government structure, because basically the EU itself is no longer a democratically controlled entity. But you can still influence on a local level, and I have been sort of trying to support and also sort of fund local movements to sort of change things, hopefully
Nice.
for the better.
No, that's good. That's good. Well, folks, hey, listen, like I said, I didn't want to take too much of your time. I thank Style Pigeon, thank Nick, our producer, for coming onto the show. I do want to finalize with a few things. First, definitely visit my website, cryptocurator.com. That's where you're going to find access to all the information, both shows and all the news that I do. Definitely go to Bitcoin Live's YouTube channel, like and subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. That way you're being notified when we do have a show. We have so many great shows. Gingerly, which Style Pigeon's on Gingerly. We have 3D Changes. That's another great show. Of course, my two shows. And then there's Bitcoin Live itself that have some great guests on, covering a whole slew of content, not just like CBDCs or politics or freedom or, gingerly, you guys do a ton of different topics, which I love those topics. And then Bitcoin Live, you cover, NFTs and art. And guys, there's just a lot of content around Bitcoin Live. Definitely want to tune in to all of it. Hey guys, do you guys have any parting words? Where can they find you, Style Pigeon? Where can they find you, Nick?
Well, everybody can follow me on Twitter at Styled Pigeon. Super easy. And you can find everything from there. Hopefully we'll have a website coming out soon-ish. No promises. I don't have a final date or anything, but that'll just be kind of like a hub for everything that I do, along with an explanation of what it is that I do. So that'll be a good thing. So keep eyes out. But Twitter's how you find out about that. That's
awesome. I'll link our Twitter handles down below in the video, and you can find me on Bitcoin Live DB. And thank you for the pitch, Paul.
Yeah, anytime. Style, I did go to your website. It's actually up. It just has like a pigeon or something on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I've created it. I've got it almost complete, but it's locked right now. I'm actually using Shopify's interface to do it, just to house it, because I want to be able to actually have some products and things on there. Working on figuring out how to NFT gate it if I can, but I might have to like develop my whole own Shopify app to do that. So that might be a little ways out still, because I'm not a developer. So we're gonna wing it and see what happens.
And
nice.
They can find you on WooBits, right?
Yes, they can find me on WooBits. And this is the thing that you guys know about WooBits, especially for you, Style Pigeon, is that you can monetize on that platform incredibly easy using Matic and using Ethereum. And so if you're on there, if you have content, you can put it behind a sort of pay for type deal. Not all the content you put on there has to be that way, but let's just say you have an NFT or you have a product that you want people to purchase. You can take and put that behind a link, and then it comes up and it looks like the Matrix in a way, but you can click on that and people then can pay you to get access to that, because without it, they can't see it. So it's a really cool platform. People should check it out, woobits.com.
That explains the rise of Matic.
Yes, the rise of Matic, and Matic is rising well right now. And by the way, what is the market right now? I'm just curious.
Let's see.
It was running up a little bit.
I don't care, bro. I DCA.
Nice. Well done,
like a weird crypto flex, right?
I don't care about the price. I just DCA.
Bitcoin is up. It's 22K and $13.
There you go. All right, we're going back on the bull run. The bulls will run this week. I'm going to make a prediction that the bulls will run, and we will see 24 or 25K by the end of the week.
I don't know if we'll hit 25, but I'm looking for 24.
Nice.
Cool, guys. All right. Well, thank you, guys. I'm going to take off until Thursday, folks.